Well, it's just downright unsportsmanlike when people that are in justice prosecute criminals. Wow, what is wrong with the world that something like that would happen? I mean, Lindsey Graham has shown over many years now that this is a guy who just has no self-respect at all, and he's willing to deface himself on national television to defend someone that we all know he can't stand. If you go back and look at the things that he said about Donald Trump back in the 2016 campaign. I mean, that's the thing about all of these Republicans, from Kevin McCarthy to the folks over on the propaganda networks to Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz. Every single one of them is on the record at some point or another saying they hate this guy. Yeah. And yet here they are expecting all of us to believe that they really care about Donald Trump's freedom. Nobody is rooting for Donald Trump to go to jail more than these Republicans. I guarantee you they are secretly hoping that the justice system does the dirty work for them so that they don't ever have to actually take a stand against their leader. And it's just crazy politics. I mean, think about this. These are people right now who've boxed themselves into a corner in which they have to defend someone who will likely be charged with multiple crimes, from paying off porn stars to subverting democracy to trying to overthrow an election. And the so-called party of law and order would have us believe that these are all things that they should be defending. It just doesn't add up, and it's terrible politics. And they're going to add on top of that, as you put it, a field trip to go check out some insurrectionists. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah. Jill, this is the other thing. And I find what Kurt said is very key about this. Let's say Donald Trump does get arrested, right? Let's say he actually does go to jail, maybe for January 6th, maybe for the documents. What kind of jail time would he be looking at? I mean, I know that it's unprecedented to have a president in this situation. I doubt he's going to go in for 6 months and be doing, upside down sit-ups like 50 and come out and prepared to run. We know that's not going to happen. But what kind of real jail time could Donald Trump face, either for the insurrection or for attempting to overthrow the 2020 election in Georgia?
Assuming that he would get any jail time, given that he is the former president, and many people believe that with the Secret Service guarding him, he could be in home confinement. But if he were to be sentenced to jail time, he would be sentenced according to whatever the laws are that he is guilty of. Some of them carry 5-year penalties. Some of them carry 4-year penalties. Some of the state ones are, misdemeanors, possibly in New York. It could be up to a 4-year felony. So it's very hard to predict. Now, you could also have him serving consecutive sentences. He has, let's face it, we're all looking right now at the Manhattan DA's case, which at most is maybe going to be a 4-year felony. Possibly it's less. But you have Georgia, and there are multiple counts there. Right. You also have the Mar-a-Lago case. You also have the January 6th insurrection case. You also have a rape case in New York, the E. Jean Carroll case. Yes. And you have a lot of civil cases that could bankrupt him completely. So there's a lot facing him. And I don't know. I really can't predict whether it would be done consecutively or concurrently. And one would hope it would be consecutive, because these are very different crimes. And some of them go back to before he was even president. And we keep talking about, how important is the D.A. Bragg case? And I think Lawrence O'Donnell had the best answer for that, which is, had he not gotten away with that crime, if he hadn't committed that crime, he wouldn't have been president, and we could have all been spared everything else that has followed. That makes it maybe one of the most important of the crimes he's committed.
So, Maya, to think that we were basically hush money from an adult film star away from 4 of the worst years of my life and most of the world's life politically, it does sort of add weight to a case that otherwise a lot of people would say, oh, well, this is sort of the least important of all of them. When we look at these cases across the board, historically, right, treason obviously is something that's historic, unprecedented, et cetera, et cetera. But if we look at it on sort of a practical level, which of these cases also might result perhaps in changes in legislation? I look at what's happening in Georgia, and I think that if it hasn't happened already, this investigation alone should lead either to state or new federal policy where it's like, hey, look, if we have any loopholes here, we're going to pass a law now. You make that phone call, automatic felony, or you make these suggestions automatic felony, which of these is likely to actually result in some change at maybe a policy level or a structural level in our government, regardless of how the trials turn out?
Well, I think that's a very hard question to answer, and I'll tell you why. Not because we couldn't look at this and say, here are the laws we have to make clearer so that nobody can argue that they went around it. But one is what Kurt points to, which is for all of the arguments about caring about the rule of law and please don't bust it up by going after somebody who may have broken it. And, by the way, watching what's happening in Georgia, where lawmakers are looking at trying to carve back what a prosecutor can do because of Donald Trump, which is not a pro-rule of law position to take. It's not clear that there is actually any interest in lawmaking, let alone, but using it as a political tool to just protect Donald Trump. And I think that's why it's not only hypocritical, it's actually dangerous for democracy. Because one thing I will tell you as a New Yorker, one thing I will tell you as a black woman, one thing I will tell you as someone who cares about the rule of law and racial justice and civil rights, is in Manhattan, in New York City, over 180,000 people have been, just in 2 years, 2019, 2020, arrested on misdemeanors. And for things like selling churros in the subway system, things that did not endanger anyone, things that did not endanger our democracy in the slightest, and often people just trying to make a way for themselves and their families. And the majority, like half those people, are black.
Yeah.
And only 12% result in an actual conviction. But do we hear anybody running around saying, oh, these prosecutors, here's a problem for the rule of law, is that all these people are facing criminal charges for nothing. Now we have a man in power, who has wealth, and has corrupted the system and endangered our democracy. But now we want to attack Alvin Bragg for being a prosecutor? Come on.
Yeah, and it's like, this is the thing, too. It's this Republican Party who has allowed George Santos to stay in Congress.
Yes, exactly.
Who doesn't want to even talk about Jim Jordan's scrutiny about what happened when he was, the
blindest coach, the blindest wrestling coach in Ohio.
We just had this information. James Comer, in an interview, admits that he's been part of some shady things during his time. And it's like, this is a massive criminal enterprise that's masquerading as a political party. They're all about the rule of law when it's people who look like us that's on the other end of it.
Right.
But you put a white, rich person of power and privilege under scrutiny, and all of a sudden the justice system is unfair.
Yes.
We need to look at the power of prosecutors. This is too much. Like, come on, exactly what she just said. It's nonsense.
I got